Are you open to the possibility that your views on things might be incorrect? Are you open to the possibility that your views on things might be incorrect? I was listening to a conversation happening between a significantly older gentleman and a younger gentleman. And they were having a debate or a conversation about this Israel-Palestine conflict going on. Now, I won't express a view about that. I hold a view, but I won't express a view on that at the moment. But I was listening to the two gentlemen talk, and they were going back and forth, and I could hear, at least from the tone of the older gentleman, that he had this certainty about him, that, this is what is right, and this is what is wrong, and this is what is true, and this is what is not. And I didn't want to weigh in on the conversation. The conversation was happening, not far from me, and I was welcome to join in on it. But I didn't really want to say much about it. Not because I didn't have anything to say about it, but really because when I listened to the conversation, the certainty of the older gentleman made me believe that the conversation wasn't really going to be productive, because he is, after decades of believing whatever he's believed, he is convinced of the certainty of his opinion or of his belief or of his stance. And so while the conversation may be, productive, at least in hearing each other's views and each other's stances, I believe part of what the value of conversation is in the openness to be able to be enlightened about ideas that you might not have understood before or known before, right? And I think it's a difficult place for people to be, because some people think that being open to the possibility that your view might be wrong automatically means that you'll be opened up to deception or being mistaken or being led astray, which is a possibility, but it's not the natural result. And maybe it's important for me to share something that I think helps me a lot when I think about a lot of things. So there's this idea of things that are fixed and things that are flexible, right? I always like using the illustration of the human body, that the human body, your skeletal structure is fixed. The framework of your skeleton, when you're an adult at least, fundamentally is fixed. You've got, same structure up until your age, same, one spine, ribs in a certain position, caging your heart, lungs, etc., etc., etc. Fundamentally, the structure remains the same. But what fluctuates, or what is flexible, is how, your body, your fat, your flesh, etc., they fluctuate around the skeletal structure. So that at some point you might be thin, at some point you might be overweight, at some point you might be, maybe if you spend too much time in the sun, you might be darker. At some point you might, your complexion might, if you spend less time in the sun. There are some things which are flexible, and there are some things which are fixed. I think when it comes to this idea of discussing our views and truth, we must understand that our views are going to always remain flexible because of the fact that our understanding is finite, right? We don't always see everything at once. And so our conviction of things, our belief, is framed by that which we've been exposed to and our understanding of it, our finitude, the finite nature of our understanding. But there must always be a pursuit of truth, right? So our understanding is finite. Our knowledge is finite. And because it's finite, it should be flexible to the reality that because I don't know everything, there's a possibility that I'll be exposed to new information that will then change my views on things. So we must always allow our views or our stance on things to be somewhat flexible in light of any possibility of exposed truth. That's the flexible part. The fixed part is in believing that there is such a thing that is true and that will remain true regardless of whether I believe it or not, right? And that's flexible. So if I were to use two texts to illustrate this, in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 2, it says that he that thinks he knows everything, or he that thinks he has all the answers, he that thinks he knows a thing, must realize that he knows nothing yet as he ought to know it, right? So if I may claim that, I've got an absolute knowledge of a thing or an absolute knowledge of something, I must realize that I don't have the full knowledge as I ought to, right? And so it must humble me and open me up to the possibility of the fact that there's more information that I could be exposed to, which will further enlighten me and then change my stance on things. But there's also a text in Psalms 100 that talks about the fact that, God's truth endures to all generations, right? In other words, the truth is fixed and it's constant and it will last throughout all eternity, right? That there is things that are true and they will remain true regardless of whether or not I believe in them or whether or not, they will remain true because the truth is the truth. And we must have a confidence in the truth's inflexibility, that there is things, or there is truth that is true, there is truth that is true regardless of, the conditions, regardless of, it's almost as though truth is detached from any external influence because it remains true. And I think those two things can exist together, right? Things can remain fixed and things can remain flexible, where you can have a fixed belief on things, you can have a fixed belief on things. There's a dog. I wish I could show you guys. There's a dog that's in the park. Anyway, if I wasn't shooting this, I was going to play with the dog. So, going back to what we're discussing. So, there's a fixedness to the truth. The truth is fixed. The truth remains true. But there must be a flexibility in our convictions about things because of the fact that we don't have all the knowledge, all the understanding. So, in reflecting on the gentleman's thing is that the older we get, the more settled we become in our beliefs on things, right? Because you live 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years, and believe something for so long that, if it goes unchallenged, you'll remain fixed in your belief. So that's why I felt I couldn't engage in the conversation, because the gentleman was so fixed in his, viewpoint that I didn't feel as though he would be open to the possibility that his stance might be incorrect, not is, not will be, but just open to the possibility that your stance might be correct. I think it's humble for all of us as individuals to open ourselves up to the possibility that our views might be incorrect. But that view being incorrect doesn't call into doubt the reality of the truth. So let me give an example. There's different views about the creation of the earth or the origins of the earth, right? There's different views about the origins of the earth, right? That, some will have a view of what they call spontaneous generation, right? That the earth came out of nothing. And some hold a view of the earth being, by design, created. Each individual has different views about where we come from and the origins of the earth. Now, the fact that there is different views about the origins of the earth doesn't change the fact that there is a truth that exists or that must exist about the fact that the earth, originated. And especially when the views differ, they can't all be true at the same time, right? Because truth is exclusive to all externality. Truth is true because it is true. Maybe that's a philosophical conversation to be had, but there's a point I'm making that I think is most important to keep in mind. That truth is fixed and constant and is timeless. It's everlasting because it's true. Whereas our beliefs and our views must be flexible or humble enough to open themselves up to the possibility that because I don't have full understanding of the truth, maybe then I must be humble enough to unpack and go into a search of truth based on evidence. I really like how one of my favorite books in the Bible, or writers in the Bible, Luke, who writes the book of Acts, and he wrote the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke. When you look at how the writer Luke opens up his books, I really love how he writes, because he writes almost to convince a person about the truth of what he's writing about. And the way he does that is to present evidence, to say that based on this evidence, you can then know that what you believe is true. So when he writes in the book of Acts chapter 1 verse 4, he's writing to Theophilus, the person, Theophilus, and he says to him, that you may know the certainty of the things which you have come to believe. So he's saying, I'm writing this gospel to give you evidence that will give you certainty about the things you believe. So in Luke's point of view, the certainty that you have must be based on evidence, not necessarily on the fact that I've believed this for so long, right? The certainty must come from evidence. And so there is a certainty that we can have in the truth, because truth is truth. It's solid. It's like a foundation of a building. It's solid, it's what holds everything up. And so we can have a certainty in the truth, but that certainty mustn't come from fluctuating things. It must come from evidence, and which is what Luke, in the book of Luke, is trying to present. In the book of Acts, when he writes the book of Acts, when he talks about the events that took place after Jesus' death, he says, that Christ presented himself to his disciples and to his servants with many infallible proofs. The idea that truth is infallible, right? It's you can't break it down. You can't destroy the truth. And so there is a confidence that we can have in the truth, but the confidence and the certainty mustn't come from, just because I've believed it or because it's what I believe, but because it's based on tangible evidence or logical evidence or reasonable evidence. Even as believers, as Christians, God wants us to have a trust and a faith in him that's based on the evidence presented in the Bible and in his word. Are you open to the possibility that your view may be incorrect? You can have that humility that your view might be incorrect, but still be confident in the truth that if there's a conflict between my understanding and what is truth, it's not that the truth is a problem or that there's no such thing as a truth. It's that maybe I don't have a full understanding of things. And it calls to humility, and even when we have engagements and conversations, to first of all want to engage and have these hard conversations on the basis that, look, something must be true. And in our discussions, we are just on a journey to try and understand what is true. And something is true. And that truth then can be discovered on the basis of whatever is evidence. And that must be attended to with a humility that maybe my view it's possible that it might be wrong. And so I must be humble enough to unpack the evidence, to unpack the data that's in front of us. This is true not just of religion. This is true of, any other major important question that we're trying to handle in life. Say that what is the truth of the matter and how can I understand it based on the evidence presented? And to be humble enough to say that if I'm presented with further evidence, it's possible that my view might change. But right now, based on the current evidence, this is what I've, come to believe, and this is my stance. That's how I come to think about, these major questions of belief, of religion, of truth, etc., etc. I hope it'll be valuable to you as well. Just a thought, and looking forward to hearing yours. Otherwise, see you guys on the other side. Much love.